I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Today, I'm going to show you two quadcopter frames, each of which has, I think, some really interesting features, some small and some kind of big, that make them worth your attention. Even though neither of these is, to tell you the truth, the kind of quadcopter frame I personally would build. Stay tuned. You'll find out more. I saw a video recently where a video game reviewer was complaining about other video game reviewers and talking about what makes a good reviewer. And I thought some of the things he said applied to what I do as well. One of his points was that knowing where a reviewer is coming from and what kind of things the reviewer likes and doesn't like really is an important part of taking their criticism into consideration. And so when I review these frames that I'm about to show you, you gotta know that this is not the type of frame that I love to build. I like a roomier frame that's a little bit easier to just live with and deal with and keep up with on a day-to-day basis, and a little bit less work to stuff I like to say it's like laparoscopic surgery, getting in there, fixing some of these frames. But I really do like these frames for what they are, even though what they are isn't exactly my thing. And I want to show you some of the things about them that tipped me over the edge from not interested. And in fact, I did say not interested to these at first, but the more I looked at them, the more I thought, well, I kind of like that. I kind of like this. Let me tell you the kind of things that I did like about them. We'll start with this frame, and this is the Reflex, it's called, and it's from Zdrone. Of course, product link down in the video description. And what tipped me over the edge of this frame, it's the smallest thing, and you're going to think it's silly, but it was this. This is where the antenna mounts, and I really like that the antenna, number one, it's designed to come out the back. So the antenna would mount right here, and a zip tie would go through here and come out the back. You may recall, once upon a time, it was very standard to cut a circular hole in the top plate, and the antenna would mount in there. And the problem with that is that whenever anything swipes across the top plate, like a tree branch you tried to fly under and didn't succeed, or when you crash against the ground and you come in like that, right? It was breaking them off. And some guys I wish I could remember names, some guys started mounting them coming out the back. And my first thought was, well, that's terrible because the antenna's best coverage is going to be when it's straight up and down. But the point was made, and it's true, that the quadcopter is very seldom flying straight and level, right? It's on all kinds of orientations, so you're not really losing much by having the antenna coming out the back. And in fact, if you imagine an antenna going up and tilting back like that, well, it's kind of in the same orientation as an antenna coming straight out the back anyway. So I really like that any quadcopter frame that is designed this way, and really this is not unique to this frame, but the other thing that's nice is there's a little slit cut here with the idea that the antenna is going to come up through there and be held a little bit rigid, and in fact you could tie it off with a zip tie or something to hold it there, and that's going to help keep the antenna out of the motors, which is one of the problems with an antenna that comes straight out the back. Another thing that I really like about this frame is this cutout here, and that is intended for the main discharge lead to come down. So you're going to be on your PDB here, and its main discharge lead is going to come down and go through that hole to the bottom mounted battery. It's very nice that they've included this cutout here, but mostly it's nice because it gives you a place for strain relief. If you don't put some kind of strain relief on your main discharge lead, then when the battery ejects in a crash, it's going to rip the pads off your PDB, or God forbid, if you've got an all-in-one PDB and flight controller, now your flight controller's done. So it doesn't have to be a cutout exactly like this, but every frame I think should at least give you a couple of holes, like here and here, to pass a zip tie through to give some strain relief to the main discharge lead. Finally, a thing that really stands out to me about this frame is that it's only got 3 motor holes. What? You paid for 4. Now, come on. No. The nice thing about that is that it avoids the stress riser that often occurs where that 4th motor hole creates a thinner radius, a thinner part of the arm, and that's often a break point. So by removing that hole, this arm, I think, is made stronger. It's better designed. And really, 3 screws versus 4 screws. Well, if you really feel concerned, use some blue Loctite, but a lot of people fly with 2 screws and don't have any problems. So I don't think you're losing much by getting rid of that motor screw hole, but you're gaining a whole lot of strength in the arm. Really nice choice. And I'm sure we're going to see other frames doing this. I'm sure this is not the only frame that's doing this. The way that the camera plate is designed is not my favorite. It's not very, it's enough to hold the camera, and I do like that you can slide the camera forward and back. using this hole here, but it doesn't have any way to set the angle of the camera, and it's very nice to see some frames that are building them with a sort of an arc cut in there for the run cam style, where it's got 2 screw holes, and it I really like when we see frames built for this kind of camera where they'll have 1 and 2 and you can set the angle very easily. That's very nice. With this one, it's going to be a little hard to set the angle. I mean, you can't possibly tighten the screw down enough to have the angle stay. So you're going to need to do some kind of like I put some foam tape here and a zip tie around the camera to hold it up against the top plate. That has some problems too, though, because then when you take the top plate off, it wants to pull the camera off and so forth. So I don't think this is the best kind of camera mounting I've ever seen. It'll get the job done. The other thing is that because there's not a screw hole, but there's a slit, it does mean that the camera may not be completely straight side to side. Whereas with a hole, it would be more likely to be that way. I do like, however, that this gives you this cutout and it lets you protect the camera behind the front standoffs. I think that's a very important thing to increase the longevity of your camera. And I'm not the biggest fan of frames where the camera hangs out the front. This is the QuadRacer Zero, and its main innovation is something I think we're going to see a lot more of. We've seen a few frames that have tried the vertical arm style. In fact, I think the Stig from Catalyst Machine Works is the first one that I know of that tried it, and at least on a commercial scale. And the advantage of the vertical arm style is that you have better aerodynamics. So many of our mini quad designs, and we can see this in the Reflex, they have these flat arms and they kind of ignore aerodynamics. And that may have, we may have been able to get away with that in days when our quadcopters were less powerful, but nowadays the motors are so powerful, we're going so fast, that aerodynamic drag is really a major limiting factor in how fast the quadcopters go. And trying to reduce the amount of drag that the arm presents is a big part of that for 2 reasons. Number one, simply because there's less drag moving through the air, but also because it means more of the thrust column from the props is unobstructed. You get a cleaner air and more thrust from the motors. The other thing this copter does that's really neat is it adds a 3D printed canopy, and that is more than just aesthetic. The kind of sharp edges we've got, the kind of flat plates, again, when you really get going fast, that creates a lot of drag. And anything that is molded and smooth, I've heard numbers of 10 or 15% additional speed being lost to the kind of top plates that we have. Obviously, you take a wind tunnel and some calculations that are beyond my pay grade to verify. But I want you to realize that when you're seeing canopies like this on copters, it's more than just aesthetic. It has aerodynamic benefits, assuming it's designed correctly. The way this copter goes together is pretty freaking slick. There's literally 1 screw right here and a captive nut, and I'll go ahead and take it apart just to show you, holding the whole thing together. So literally 1 screw drops out, this plate comes off, and all of the arms are, then your whole copter falls apart. No, they say it's good for a quick change, but it actually is a little, I mean, maybe there's a technique to it that I just haven't learned yet. It's a little bit of a challenge getting all 4 of them back on. Oh, see, yeah. I don't know. So I'm not sure if I would be quick changing in the field at a race or something. If you get one of these frames, definitely you'll just use a little super glue to make sure that captive nut stays in. If it falls out, you got a real problem. There we go. Oh, perfect. Now it's all back together. See, that didn't take long. And then this frame, all of the electronics mount up underneath this canopy, this 3D printed canopy. And that's why, for me at least, that's going to be way too tight of a build for me to really be happy with it. Even if I finished the build, I would be annoyed the first time I had to work on it. I don't know. I guess you could make the argument that it's really easy to pop the top off and get at it, but just getting all the parts to fit feels to me like more hassle than I personally am a fan of. But I know that some of you out there are looking at this and loving this. If you're a hardcore racer, I think this frame is really worth a look, because many of the frames that have the vertical arm design have other problems with flexiness and so forth. One of the major problems is that the arms, may flex in that direction, and this one is a really interesting way of approaching it. It doesn't need any metal pieces to sort of reinforce it. They've done it all with just the carbon and the 3D printed pieces. Some people are suspicious of the 3D printed motor mounts. They swear that they've tested the heck out of them, and they include spares with it if you need to replace them. And they're also going to publish the STL files, so if you have a 3D printer, you can make your own. So that's nice. So there you go. That is the QuadRacer Zero and the Zdrone Reflex frame, both showing off some interesting design points in terms of aerodynamics and just general sort of functionality that I look for when I'm evaluating a frame. This one's on pre-order right now. It is not up for sale yet, but it will be up for sale soon. Link in the video description. This one is for sale right now, and you can either buy it through Zdrone's site directly, which Zdrone is based in Israel, so that's where it'll ship from. You can also buy it through Pyroflip or Pyroflip? I think it's Pyroflip. You can buy it through Pyroflip in the US, but the 10% off coupon doesn't apply. Decide for yourself which of those you want. Thank you for watching, and happy flying.